All right, here we go. Wednesday night Sunday school, where we do Sunday school on Wednesday night. We will do tonight just like we've done every other Wednesday night Sunday school. I will give copious amounts of breaks for you to ask questions, hopefully pertaining to what we're actually talking about. Janine Edrington, okay. Moving forward. Existentialism. We're going to talk about existentialism tonight. So you have a definition there. It is a philosophical theory or approach which emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent, determining their own development through acts of the will. So there you go. Lots of big words. The essence of existentialism's most important goal is to transcend nihilism. Remember we talked about nihilism last week. Nihilism is the eventuality of naturalism. So if you create a worldview where the system is closed and everything is cause and effect and we have no control over everything, you will quickly descend into a place where you have no self-autonomy and you have no self-determinism, meaning you have no free will. And as that descended into that, then nihilism is born, which means then that everything is absurd. We can't really know anything. There's no such thing as ethic. There's no such thing as knowledge. We are just hopeless machines marching into oblivion. And like I told you last week, this worldview didn't catch on. It was not very popular. And so then what happens is you have people trying to respond to that, and you then will jump into existentialism, which was the response to that. So it takes two basic forms. You have atheistic existentialism and theistic existentialism. We're going to do atheistic tonight. We will do theistic next week. Atheistic should make sense because that is the same as atheism. So atheism, atheistic existentialism are kissing cousins because that's what you use when we talk about things. They are not the same in that naturalism is atheism. But atheistic existentialism is like atheism holding a flower. That's the best way to think about it. Like, oh, it's happy because we're existentialists too. But it's really not. So we're going to talk about tonight. Like I said, we'll do atheistic first and then do theistic second. Theistic's a tad bit older than atheistic, but interestingly, neither were relevant until World War I. So you don't really have existentialism come into the zeitgeist of culture until post-World War I. It's when this starts to show up in the world. John Paul Sartre, he wrote his book, Existentialism and the Human Self, I think is the name of it. So we're going to look at him tonight as the main influence. The other one is Albert Camus is the other big influence on it. So we won't look at him as much tonight, but if you're bored and you're looking for some, fun time reading, there you go. Go find Albert Camus and look him up. It's spelled Camus, but it's Camus, so you can look him up on Wikipedia and read all about him. Okay, so what is atheistic existentialism? Here you go. Atheistic existentialism accepts these things from naturalism. So it doesn't change much from naturalism. So it accepts matter's eternal, God doesn't exist, death is the extinction of personality and individuality. Through science and human reason, we can understand our universe. Ethics are relative to human beings. History is a linear stream of events linked by cause and effect, but without an overarching purpose. So all of those things, which are all of the naturalistic worldview, are the same for the existentialist worldview. So there's no difference. The difference comes when they start to look at the relationship of human nature, so your consciousness and like what makes you you and free will, and then your relationship with the world or with the cosmos are the two things that it starts to radically differ from naturalism. So first up then is their view on the cosmos is different than naturalism because it says the cosmos is composed solely of matter, but to human beings reality appears in two forms, the subjective world and the objective world. Now before we go any further, the only conclusion that you can get from this is just because Sartre said it. Like there's nothing here that you can like look at as like they looked at science and this proved it or there's some factual basis for this. This is just straight up ideology. That Sartre looked at the problem of nihilism, that humans they don't have any value in a closed system, and said, well, that's not true because I feel like I have value. And if I feel like I have value, then this system that we've created isn't actually true. And if it's not true, then I have to come up with something to make it work. And he came up with this. So all of this is just philosophy. There's no basis for it. There's just, this is what I believe. And so if you're going to try to be a naturalist and exist within the mindset of the mind and how human beings think about themselves, then existentialism may be the way to do it. So to further break it down, the objective world is the world of the material. It's the cause and effect, chronologically, clock ticking time, of flux, of mechanism, the physical, tangible world that we study with science. So the objective world is just everything that's physical, that reacts in a certain way, that's non-thinking, non-human. Does that make sense? So then the subjective world is the world of the mind, consciousness, awareness, freedom, stability. Time has no meaning, for the subject is always present to itself. There's no past, there's no future, which I know feels like somebody's smoking dope, but if you stop and think about what he's saying that the subjective world is your inner dialogue. So it's not like you can't have there is no past to that or future to that. There's just your inner dialogue right now in this moment is what he's talking about. And so he says that is different than the objective world. Naturalism sought to find unity between the two worlds, making consciousness a mechanism of the machine. That makes us a slave to the closed system and leads to nihilism. Therefore, existentialism rejected the unity and opted in favor of the subjective world. We're the only beings in the universe who have consciousness and free will, so they work from that given. Science and logic do not penetrate our subjective mind because value, meaning, and significance are not tied to science and logic. Our value does not come from an objective world we cannot control, but from our consciousness over which we have complete control. So, in other words, if you take the world and you split it into two parts, you have the physical and then you have the brain part, like the way you think, your consciousness. Existentialists essentially reduce existence and purpose to the mind, to the conscious mind, the way you think, the way you... So as we move forward and as we look at this, that is the foundation that we are going to build from. It's different from nihilism because nihilism leaned into the unity of the two, right? Nihilism just said your consciousness is just a mechanism. Remember we talked about it like your brain and the way you react. You have no way of knowing if you're reacting the way you're reacting because you actually are reacting to that, or is that because of centuries of genetics has made you react that way? Whereas existentialism comes along and goes, we don't care about the objective world. We just care about the essence of man, what makes us us. Why are we different? Why are we the only conscious thing in the universe? It's also interesting as we get into it to remember the time frame that this is popular. This is World War I. So this is pre-World War II, pre-Hitler, pre-Red Wave, pre-communist garbage, so it makes sense in the world then for a philosophical idea like this to come along. Questions on that before we move on? We got that? Okay. Human beings then are complex machines. Personality is an interrelation of chemical and physical properties that we don't fully understand. For human beings alone, existence precedes essence. People make themselves who they are. So, and I know that, again, is wordy and it's hard to grab hold of, but that's a direct quote out of Sire's book. So let's talk about it. So John Paul Sartre said it this way: if God does not exist, there is at least one being in whom existence precedes essence, a being whose existence before he can be defined by any concept, and that being is man. So think about it this way. In the objective world, things just are, right? Salt is always salt. Water is always water. Trees, always trees. Bees are always bees. We can make other words that rhyme and go on and on here if you would like. So that is what? Fleas. Fleas are always fleas. Knees are always knees. See? It's a fun game. That's all objective world stuff, and those things, that is inherently what that thing is, right? Like it can't change that thing. It can't, there's nothing that a bee can do to ever not be a bee. A bee is just a bee. That's what it is. What existentialists say, that the one thing that makes us different from the objective world is human beings are not that way. So if you put it into practice, think about like if you have a soldier named John who's worried about being a coward. Is he a coward or isn't he? Well, the only way to ever know if John's a coward is what? If he does something cowardly. So up until the point of doing it, he's not a coward. But if he's faced with some life-threatening thing where he should be brave and he's not brave, then he's a coward. But until then, he's not a coward. So he can worry about it, and he can think about it, but his definitions can change based upon his experience. Really, when you talk about existentialism, experience is what they worship. Everything is about the experience, what you create, the way you think, the things that you have happen to you. That's what makes you who you are. That means that human beings are totally free as regard to your nature and your destiny, right? Because you determine who you're going to be. If John doesn't want to be a coward, then when the opportunity comes to be brave, and you won't be a coward. So there is no intrinsic value, there is no intrinsic built-in definition who you are. We make the choice. When we make the choice, that becomes our definition, which makes us different than the objective world. Each of us is uncoerced, radically capable of doing anything imaginable with our subjectivity. We can think, will, imagine, dream, project visions, consider, ponder, and invent. We are free within and thus can create our own values by affirming worth. We have value because we say you do. We say we do. Value then is inner, and the inner is in each person's own. So you determine your value when you do these things that you're capable of doing that nothing else in the objective world can do. This solves the problem in an existentialist mind that nihilism, where it says you're not doing anything, right? Remember we talked about last week, like you can do all this stuff and you have no way of knowing if what you're doing is just, are you doing it or are you responding to your genetic makeup? What the existentialists are saying is like, no. Our consciousness proves that we are not a part, there's a part of us that doesn't fit into this cause and effect system. There's a part of us that's different than that is somehow existing parallel to it. Meaning then, we can determine who we are. We can figure out who we're going to be. We aren't confined to what the world says we are. Which, as Christians, you can see how you can get theistic existentialism, right? Like, this is atheistic, God is dead. But you could see how you could be a parasite on Christian theism, because some of this stuff should resonate with, like, this is what, this seems really familiar to Christianity. It's what Christians believe. But remember, what's the basis for any of this? Well, Sartre said it. That's it. Like in Christianity, you have the foundation of God, right? You have a plumb line to go back to know what choice to make, and are those choices right, and how should we live, how should we act. With this, what he's saying is like, no, none of that matters. What matters is just doing, being, creating, existing. That's what gives you value and gives you worth and makes you different. Because of that, then, the objective world stands against human beings and appears absurd. So, in an existentialist mind, the objective world, science and logic, becomes absurd, because the idea that your consciousness is what makes you unique and gives you value and gives you worth is so much in opposition to how a naturalistic world works. They then start to view that naturalistic world as absurd. The objective world is orderly. The subjective world knows no order. What is present to it, what is here and now is. Therefore, we're strangers in a foreign land. We must learn to accept that in order to transcend our alienation and pass through our despair, death is the ultimate victory of the objective world, but we must live in the face of that absurdity. We must revolt and create value. Value is found only in reason and creativity. So Sartre's point was, to be a self-fulfilled human being, you need to create value. You need to do things that celebrate your consciousness. You need to do things that celebrate being alive. You need to have experience. You need to go have as much experiences as you can have. You need to go and just experience every possible thing you can, because it's from that experience then that you give yourself value and you give yourself worth. You redefine who you are. And so that was his pitch and his push on that. Everybody with me? Questions? Yes. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah. Life is meaningless, so live meaningfully. Is make our life have meaning. Yeah. Hold on, we'll get there. That's the problem. Yeah, that's the deconstruction. But that dog isn't vicious until it does something vicious. To that point, it's just a dog. Correct. And we will actually talk about that exact thing and how some of these guys went so far off the deep end that they would just sit in their houses and exist only in their mind. Because in my mind, I can jump off buildings and I can fly. In my mind, I can go to distant planets. In my mind, I can... before that. But, right? A lot of artists. Oh, yeah. A lot of artists, a lot of like, yeah. It's the end of, it's kind of the end of the Enlightenment, and then moving on into postmodern mindset. So this is the transition. So it's always birthed out of art or academia. That's where philosophy comes from. So those two butt heads, they always have throughout history, and they come up with these things, and then you see it. But existentialism especially was way more in the art end of things than the academic end of things, because it was a rejection of academia. I mean, it was like, we don't like naturalism. We don't like this scientific system you've created and all this logic and reason, because we can think, like we look at a flower and we don't see like pistil and stamen, and we see beauty, and we want to recreate it, abstractly, and and you're like, well, why do we want to do that? We got to figure it out. Enter John Paul. No, nothing like the Matrix. Although, kind of Matrixy from this place. The objective world is the Matrix. Neo is the subjective world because he exists only in his mind. He's not actually in the world, but he is at war with that world because his consciousness is greater than the world. There you go. Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. Yes. Well, you know what it birthed? The hippies. This is the father and mothers of the hippies. The hippie movement came out of existentialism. You can see how if life is meaningless, so make life meaningful, you can see how quickly you could take that, and if it feels good, do it. Make that your motto. It's the same statement. Like this birthed the hippies. Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's fiercely individualistic. Yes. Yeah. In atheistic, yes. In theistic, maybe there is. Right. Yeah, right. Well, the whole thing is a contradiction. The whole thing is that you've created a paradox that doesn't work because you're adhering to all of these you're adhering to all these objective rules about existence. Like you're still saying there's a naturalistic world that's cause and effect. You're just saying inside of that you're special and you're still different even though you agree with all of these rules, and you're special because you're conscious. And so since you're conscious, then you have to create out of your consciousness, and that gives you value and gives you worth and makes you higher than the objective world, which is, but all of it is just because Sartre said so. No, he's a brilliant French philosopher. Yeah, it's incredibly brilliant. Because it's like if you don't, Amy and I are talking about it coming in. Philosophy is built on really, really smart people who don't know how really to relate to culture, but can examine culture. They make these they write these statements, write these books, manifestos, and then somebody else comes along and goes, "Well, I disagree," and then they write their response, and then they just argue. But what happens with philosophy, people don't realize is the philosophy then is out there. Most people don't read it because it's heady and it's hard and these people are weird. It feels like they're on drugs. Artists read it. Politicians read it. People of influence read it. So then that philosophy filters down into those aspects of culture. So then that philosophy starts to influence politics and starts to influence art, starts to influence how we take care of people, how we think about people's worth and people's value. So all of that trickles down. And so even though philosophy sometimes feels like, this is drug-induced and stupid, as a world, like when you're doing a worldview class and you're talking about how do we relate and you have to, this is a huge influence on the world, huge influence. And even more so next week, when we talk about theistic existentialism, you will have moments when we discuss it where you will go, I don't see what's wrong with this. It's such a close thing it's such a fine-lined heresy to Christianity and so it is really important to understand the idea that they're presenting, even though sometimes it feels like this guy was clearly on dope. No, yes, I think that man will inherently try to create order. No, they try to create order out of chaos. So the only thing that can do that is God, but you're created in the image of God, so each of us have a penchant within us to try to create order, even though the only right order is God's order, and that's how you end up with weird philosophies. And if Karl Marx doesn't write his Communist Manifesto, you don't have the whole communist movement is all birthed out of some weird philosopher writing that 2% of the population shouldn't have all the money and everybody should work for them to make them rich, and if you do that, the proletariat will rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie, and so we should support the working class. That's philosophy that had a huge influence on the world, you know what I mean? And that's because some weirdo in an academic room somewhere sat down and wrote the Communist Manifesto. So I think these guys are brilliant. They're misguided, but you need to understand the influence that is here. This is the father of if it feels good, do it. This is the father of, it's like neo-hedonism that you're going to get back into, because if the only way you can have value is if you create or you invent, it's just a shortfall to, and then what I'm going to create and invent is personal pleasure. Yeah. Yes. The letters in Revelation? Like the Nicolaitans and all those guys? Yes. Yeah. And yes. Yeah. Perverting it. Yeah. Pervert. That's the word you're looking for. Write it down back there, then you'll have it. Yeah. Well, not only that, Kevin, they're looking, oh, so you have that. You have World War I, which is this horrible, bloody, violent world event that is, I mean, is unfathomable really when you start, like, and nobody knows anything about it because nobody makes movies about it, but, it's rough. So you have that. You have a descent into nihilism in philosophers in the academic world, that life has no purpose and has no meaning, everything's absurd, we should all just die. You want proof, look at World War I. So you can see then how, like, Sartre and these guys who come along, they start to go like, no, like we do, like human beings have value. Like we shouldn't have to have a class to like convince you that, like, what happened? How did we descend into this that, so because we reject Christianity, then somehow now human beings have no value? Like, we all know humans have value. You can't just gun people down in the trenches who disagree with you. So we have to make this worldview work. We have to figure out, and it's out of that then, that they're like, you know what if life was not about power, life was not about authority, life was not about, life was just about experience. Just going out and living and loving people and just being a part of the system, creating art, writing poems, writing music, hanging out. It's the hippies, right? Like peace, love, and eat a turnip, make love, not war. Like that's who we're going to be. We can do this. We don't need religion to tell us this. Why may have a job? That's just subjecting yourself to the man. You don't want to do that. Like you're just part of the machine. You don't want to be a part of the machine. Right? You want to transcend the machine. You want to rise above it. You're not a part of this objective world. That's where this comes from. You do know, though, like where this is headed, and the problem we're going to rent. My pad's about to die, so I need to find where we are in our notes. Is we're headed to World War II. So in the middle of in the middle of World War I and World War II, you have this whole thing, but then what happens is World War II. So it starts to fall apart again because, because it's worse. World War II is worse. I mean, and then you have Stalin, and then you have Pol Pot, and then you have the North Korean debacle. Yeah, you just have like atrocity after atrocity. So. You ever read Truman's biography? You should read his biography about it. I don't remember. I think it's called Truman. Was the one I read. Yeah, but it was about when he started to get the reports back that they were taking heavy casualty on the island hop, and then not only that, they had evidence that they were eating prisoners of war and filleting them, and he was like, "I'm not subjecting America. We're not doing this." And then on top of that, you put into his brain, we've just come out of Germany where we've just found all these camps where they have been systematically killing. I mean, they killed, 90% of the Jews out of Poland? Gone. Like, you can see why, like, even though it's something to stroke, you can see why Truman said, we're done. This is done. We're going to end this right now. And he struggled the rest of his life with it, Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, and it makes you realize how crazy Japan was because we had to do it twice. They did. They knew. Yeah, they knew. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Oppenheimer, the first time they blew it up, was convinced it would create a black hole and destroy the world. Yeah, yeah. He was terrified of it. It's the same as a Hadron Collider. You guys know about it in, where's it at? Overseas? So science has built the Hadron Collider. They've built this big circle thing that they take electrons and they send one to the left and they send one to the right in a circle, and it goes like 40-some miles or something, and they try to hit them against each other on the other side. It's where they found the God particle. But when they were doing that, they wrote countless papers about this will either prove the existence of the God particle, or this will create a black hole that will suck all of existence in it, and we will all cease to exist. Turn it on, Ed! The idea of the God particle is that you need some sort of particle that can exist, that you can create something out of nothing. Yeah, so you need a Big Bang particle. So when you run electrons, they did it too. Like it happened, but then the science is all divided about did they really create it or not. But here, we're not talking about existentialism. Let's get back. In full recognition of and against the absurdity of the objective world, the authentic person must revolt and create value. This is how existentialism revolts against nihilism. Nothing is of value in the objective world in which we become conscious. But while we are conscious, we create value. The person who lives an authentic existence is the one who keeps ever aware of the absurdity of the cosmos, but who rebels against the absurdity and creates meaning. Dostoevsky said the meaning of life consists of a man's life consists in proving to himself every minute that he is a man and not a piano key. John Paul Sartre said, to choose to be this or that is to affirm at the same time the value of what we choose. We can never choose evil. We always choose good. He also said, if I've discarded God the Father, there has to be someone to invent value. You've got to take things as they are. Moreover, to say that we invent value means nothing else than this. Life has no meaning a priori. Before you come alive, life is nothing. It's up to you to give it meaning. And value is nothing else but the meaning you choose. And that way, you see there's a possibility of creating human community. So, what he believed was human beings will always choose good because we are coded that way, I guess. No, because your consciousness allows you to choose, right? So if that's true, then you should be able to always choose good because you can pick, right? So if you have all of the information, then everything that you pick is good. The problem with this is they take the views of ethic from naturalism that says morality and ethics are subjective to the individual, which means then that you can be an existentialist and you can do things that are atrocious, but in your brain you feel like are good, right? Like Hitler did. Hitler did not think killing all the Jews was evil. He thought that was a good thing. And then he convinced his whole country it was a good thing, and they pretty much all went along with it. Or at least his leadership did, because you've made sense. So what you say makes sense, and so I'm going to do what you say. And we all collectively think what we're doing is making a better world, which is a problem. Which is the next question then. What's the problem with this view? Subjectivity leads to solipsism, which is a big word that I had to look up today. So if you don't know that one, welcome to the club. It's the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. So the only thing that you can know that actually is your brain, is not your brain, the consciousness within your brain. Your ability to think within the cells of your brain is the only thing that you are positive is actually real. Everything else could be an illusion. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside one's own mind is unsure. The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. The Matrix. So, essentially what they're saying is that if you make human beings, if you put ethic and morality in your hands and every choice that we make is good, you could create a worldview then off of that worldview that the only thing that would matter is yourself, which is the fierce individualism of existentialism. The only thing that can really matter is what you have determined within your own brain has value and worth. And since your brain is unique to yourself and your consciousness, what these people who then descended into this weird philosophy did was they said, there's no way for me to know what is in your brain. I don't know how do I know what you're actually telling me is actually true? There's no way to know what you're saying is true other than I have to trust you that what you're saying is true, but it could be a lie. Because over time, we've proven that over and over again, right? Like Christians or people say things but then they do the opposite. And so because of that, then you create this fiercely selfish thing where you have multiple choices that are made that all seem to contradict each other, and the world kind of falls apart. So Sartre responded to that. When that came out as a criticism to him, he said that the people recognize a center of subjectivity when they come together in community. Nothing can be good unless it's good for all. Community then assures consciousness is collective. So Sartre says that if you bring a community of people together, the community then will decide what is good, which should ring a bell because this is exactly what nihilism said, right? So he basically just went back and embraced this nihilistic idea that human beings, when put together, will come up with what is collectively right. It's the cultural thing of nihilism. So culturalism is now the word of the day, again, inside of even this system. A community together creates collective consciousness, and collective consciousness will then all choose the same thing. And that's how we know what's right and what is wrong. Nothing can be good unless it's good for all, which is a strange statement, right? Like the only thing, anytime anything is good, unless if it's totally good for the community. That's the only way we can know something is good. Is it good for all of us? Well, how do you quantify that? Like, what's that look like in action? It creates problems. Sartre himself said if we choose it, then it's good, which can't be reconciled with the atrocities in human history. Even more damning, this idea can be used by morally corrupt to justify intensely evil actions as ethically sound because they're making it better for the whole, as in Hitler. This undermining of universal morality found in the character of God leads to moral relativism just as nihilism did. Why atheistic existentialism's approach to morality is a more poignant and thoughtful existence than nihilism, it still doesn't answer the basic question is why do I believe in right and wrong? If God is dead, then there's no such thing as universal ethic, and it's very hard to reconcile with human consciousness. Existentialism is just nihilism wearing a mask of value, a mask stripped away when we come face to face with death. So, I mean, you understand the idea, of what they're doing, what he's trying to accomplish, but you're just putting lipstick on a pig. Like, this still doesn't answer the question. This still doesn't answer, why are we awake? Why are we conscious? Why can we think? And it doesn't answer the question of right and wrong. Like, no philosophy that we will look at from here on out can give a sound answer for why right and wrong exists. If you remove God and you remove a plumb line for morality, then what are we judging it upon? Where does it come from? And why did we evolve it and nothing else in creation did? You don't have, animals don't think like, oh, look, a pile of bananas. I better save these bananas so that everybody in the group gets a banana. No, the monkey will eat as much bananas as it can until it makes itself sick and then hide the other bananas so that the other monkeys can't get it, because what's important to the monkey is survival. And nobody looks at the monkey and goes, you're morally corrupt. You just go, look at that smart monkey. But if you do that in humanity, you're a terrible person, right? Like, you'd be like, what's this guy doing hoarding all the bananas when we're starving. Like you don't like that. But why don't you like that? Like where does that come from? What is that thing within us that points to us going, I want some sort of answer for why my conscience leads me to believe that some things are okay and some things aren't okay. Well, yeah, they make everything in life about the choice. So existentialism says, well, like Amy said, life is meaningless, so make your life meaningful. Well, to make your life meaningful, then you would do good things, right? It wouldn't be meaningful for you to go out and kill 25 women. That's not meaningful. That's a waste of a life. Why would you do that? So what Sartre would push for is, no, you need to go experience life. Go do all, because once you're dead, you're dead. Like you are in opposition against the objective world. You are going to come in face to face with the cause and effect system. You're going to die. So the only way to revolt and rebel against that is to experience as much of this world as you possibly can. Well, it's the world you live in. I mean, think about that is the world that we live in. You know, eat, laugh, and love because tomorrow you die. And so it's a huge influence on the world we're a part of. It also is a worldview that creates apathy. Like apathetic people end up existential. Because you don't run into, like this is the difference between, like atheists are usually dogmatic, right? Like I don't believe there is no God and I've read every philosophical book and I can prove it to you and we just exist on this cold plane of human existence. Existentialists are like, I don't know, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't really care about God. Why are we talking about God? Like I just want to be, man, right? I just want to live and love and eat and experience everything that's great in this world. That's what I want to do. Why are we talking about all that stuff? Like, who cares? Well, that's a lot of people in this world. Like, there are a lot of people who are existentialists and don't even realize it. You know, like, if you don't think that's true, go to your job and find somebody who doesn't want anything to do with religion and invite them to church and watch their faith, right? I don't want to get into all that. I just want to be. I just want to exist. Why do I have to think about anything? I don't want to deal with the questions you're asking. I don't want to work through this. I just want to be. Well, that's existentialism. But the problem is, it doesn't really answer any of life's questions. You kind of just put a bag on your head, and you've created a whole worldview that's about you want to experience life to the fullest, but you have taken everything that you can possibly experience and removed it because you've denied the creator of the experience. So then you're like, well, I don't want to talk about any of the holes in my theory or any of the questions I have or any of the reasoning or any of the logic, and you're telling me that my consciousness and my ability to think and create is what gives me value and gives me worth. Well, I'm thinking there should be some sort of answer for these questions, but I can't seem to find it, and now I've wandered into this dark hole of paradox and my head hurts, right? So let's just eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die. Questions? And what's funny is, I think that would have broke Sartre's heart. Sartre's heart would have been broken to hear somebody go, existentialism is dark. Because the whole point, I think, what he was trying to get at was, it's not dark. World War I is dark. Nihilism is dark. Life lived without meaning and purpose is dark. You need to create meaning. You need to create purpose. You need to find things that are fun and do those things. You need to experience life and have a good time and be happy. And so, you know, but for believers, you just do go like, yeah, but we're still all going to die. Like, we're still marching towards death. We're still like, hello, are we not going to talk about? Well, no, exactly. Well, and the thing too is, you have to remember in a modern day existence, these worldviews that we're going to talk about now are stepping stones. Like, you won't run into nowadays in modern academia a lot of people who are like, I'm an atheistic existentialist. You're not going to run into that because they've moved on. There's a new philosophy. There's a new argument. We're going to talk about postmodernism and phenomenology, and we're going to get into, you know, other heady stuff that we're arguing about now that's going to trickle down and make culture insane. But we're past all that. That's not where we are. But for us, we need to know the building blocks that get us to the insanity that is our modern world. And this is one of them. This is where you get the peace, love, eat a turnip, feels good, do it. Right? Which didn't work for you hippies in the room. It didn't. It didn't. It didn't work. It did not work. Because what happened to the hippies? Think about the hippies. What happened to the hippies? Vietnam. Vietnam happened to the hippies. So you took peace, love, and eternity, and you slapped it in the face of a war they didn't want to be a part of or go to. So then they weren't about loving each other and being in communities. They were about revolting against the U.S. government. So by the time you get to the mid-'70s and the '80s, they are literally at war with the U.S. government. You have the Weatherford Underground that are going around blowing stuff up because they're so we're supposed to be loving everybody and we're not. And I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the man, so I'm taking them down. Like, that's not. Yeah, well, that's a whole different weirdness. They became Jesus people. What happened to the Jesus people? By the '80s, they went Nick first into full gospel and were worshiping money instead of Christ. Whoops. Oh, did I say that out loud? So, other questions about this? You guys get this one? Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, no, they were pacifists until the government went after them. It was fine to be in Haight-Ashbury and sit on the streets and smoke pot with your hippie friends and draw flowers on things and sing songs about how everything's peace and happy until the government shows up and says you can't be here and you got to get out. And if you burn draft cards, we're going to arrest you and we're going to open fire on you at Kent State and kill you. And like when that started happening, then they were Nixon. Like when Nixon rolled around, that's when they were like we can't. And then it leaked that they were running dossiers on all of the main hippie, like Abby Hoffman and all of them. And so this whole thing of like, we can just put a bag on our heads and just exist and be happy and love each other and everything's going to work out great doesn't work because man is inherently evil. So while you have some people that don't go as far down that road as others, left to our own devices, mankind will always choose what's most beneficial for itself. Like, they don't think about the good for others. They don't think about the good of the group. They think about what benefits me. What helps me. That's why communism never worked. On paper, communism's great, but the problem is communism doesn't work in real life because, people are greedy and except capitalism. Right. Capitalism works better than communism, though, because we don't kill the people who disagree with us. That was the problem with communism, because communism is built around the idea that the proletariat is at war with the bourgeoisie. So if you have people who stand against you, you should take them out. Whereas capitalism is built around the idea that greed is God. So how do I make the most money? No, greed is God. Money is God. How do I make the most money possible? So if I don't take care of my workers and I don't at least convince them that they're being taken care of, then they won't work as well and I won't make as much money. So I gotta figure out where's the fine line that I still get to get my $1 million bonus because I had an idea and them making enough money that they want to keep working. Right. Right. Yes. Well, and attitude, more than I think for Christians, it's really important in this world that you speak with actions. So, what we're talking about tonight is this fierce individualism, and it's all about you and your experience. Christ is diametrically opposed to that, to the point that he says, kill yourself. Kill that self-ego. Kill that thing inside of you that makes you think you're more important than the guy sitting next to you, to the place that if you're more blessed financially and you're sitting in a church with somebody who's not, you should give what you have to them so that they can exist too, because none of this stuff matters. So that's radical talk. And I think if you're going to stand up and say, we're a Christian community, we're Christian brothers and sisters, what speaks in this world is put your money where your mouth is. Right? Instead of just going, well, we're Christians, and so we hate the gays, and we always vote Republican, and we don't watch TVMA. Like being like, no, actually we've bought houses and given them to single moms, and we have drug rehabilitation programs, and we have education programs, and because we are concerned about the collective. We're concerned about the community that is Christ's body, because there is no individualism. There is Christ alive within the church. And the church is not subjugated to this individualism of American culture. It's subjugated to the cross. Right. Yeah. Yeah. When helping hurts. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's the difference, Kevin. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever. Whatever that's your experience. Yeah. Well, yeah, because you created your value and worth with your faith. But I create my value and worth because I painted pictures of flowers.